Hello and welcome back to Shopcuts. So today I'm going to show you how to build some shaker style cabinet doors. This one here is a paint grade door, and it's what I call it's a 5-piece door. Meaning you have 2 rails, 2 stiles, and a flat panel. So that's 5 pieces. Before we get started, we need to figure out the sizes of all of our pieces that we need, and to do that we'll have to start by knowing what kind of door we're going to make. So this one's going to be an overlay door, meaning that it's going to overlay our face frame by a 1/2 inch on all the sides. So on this particular example, my opening is 11 inches wide and 19 inches tall, and so it means our door, it's going to be 12 inches wide and 20 inches tall. So in order to figure out the size of our parts, we'll need to know that. So on our stiles, it's easy. These pieces right here, those pieces go all the way up like that. So those pieces are 20 inches. That's easy to figure. Our rails, however, go in between the stiles like that. And so we have to figure out what the length is of our rails. To do that, what I usually do is I find out what my size of my engagement is, or my tenon is, and my groove is on my the cutters I'm going to use. In this case, they're 7/16 inch of engagement right there. So I will make my rough stock 2 and 7/16 inches wide, by about 13-16 inches thick. And then to figure out the length of my rail pieces, I will take, instead of taking 2 and 7/16, I'll say take 2 inches and subtract 2 inches and 2 inches. So on a 12-inch door, my rails are going to be 8 inches. So subtract 4 inches from the 12 inches. So they're 8 inches long, and that will fit. By the time you get it all milled up, that will fit perfectly, and you'll have a 12-inch door once it's finished. So one of the things I always make too is what I call like a setup block. This shows me everything I need to know on this particular job to recreate these doors in the future. Obviously it has the style of cutter, in this case a shaker style, the thickness of the stock, which is 13/16 in this case, the placement of my cutter, how high it is on the stock, and it also, I have my hole for my hinge, the bore holes for my hinges. It shows me the spacing from the ends of the doors. So everything I need to know is right here on one block, and then I'll put the job name and the date, just some identifying information on here, and put them in a box, and if I ever need to access that information again, it's right there and handy and ready to go. So stick around and we'll get started and making some doors. So I went through and pre-milled all my stock here. I actually kind of rough milled it, or I ran the faces through the drum sander to bring it down to about 13/16 thickness, and then I ripped all the pieces on the table saw at 2.5 inches, and that left me a 1/16 of an inch where I could clean them up through the drum sander for the edges, clean up the edges through the drum sander, or on a jointer or table saw or whatever. But that way each and every piece is nearly identical at 2 and 7/16 now that it's all cleaned up. I try to do that and try to get all my pieces around, I figure about 20-30% more than what I need. And then I'll show you, I've got a list here that will write out the size of the door opening size and the finished door size, and then I do my calculations as to what the part sizes will be. And I've got some software that does this for me, but on this one I just decided to do it myself. by hand. Sometimes it's quicker if you just have a small batch of doors to do it by hand. And however, the software I got, I think it's called Cabinet Planner, and it wasn't very expensive. It was less than $100 for the program. So okay, so we're going to go and pre-cut all of our blanks for our door parts, and I'll show you some of that. I'll probably do some of that off camera too, and I label them as I go according to the number of the door that I'm making, just so I don't get mixed up, and I'll show you how that works too as we get going. Okay, we got all of our blanks cut for all of our rails and stiles, and you can see I've got different markings on them. I've got the length of each piece, the number for the door or cabinet it goes with, and then on the ends I've got an R or an S, rail or stile. And it's very important to stay really organized like this, because once you get over to your router table or your shaper and you start to machine these parts, you don't want to be thinking at that point what part is what. So it's very important to take the time ahead of time, label each end, rail or stile, and we'll start by machining the rail, the ends on the rails like this. So we'll do that first on each end of all the boards marked with an R, the cope cut. And then we'll go back and after that we'll machine an edge on all the boards. And then of course it fits together like that. Also, hang on to a few of your scraps, because once you set up your machine, you're going to want a few scraps of the same thickness to set the machine up with. And then after you get that dialed in, go ahead and make your setup block. And like I said earlier, your setup block is basically your logbook, so to speak, of this particular job. So in the future, if you had to reproduce a certain piece or a door, you'll know exactly the thickness of material, the exact depth of the router bit, the placement of the hinge holes, all the pertinent information can all be on one board. And I've got a box I just file these in, and with the customer's name on it or whatever. So real handy. It's nice to have. So from this point, we will take all of our boards over to the router table that are marked with an R, and we will start our cope cut. So we'll see you at the router table.